Here we go. We're at another part in the story. This part of the story is a little hard. It's hard to read. It's hard to get through because it really does talk about that dark night. And I mean, we talked about the Passover and we talked about how the angel of death passed over the Hebrews in Egypt and how if they had the blood of the lamb on the doorposts that the angel of death went over and didn't touch them. But that was a scary night. And so now we're going to talk about the time that the Lamb of God saved us and where his blood was shed. And this is a hard story, but I want you to know he knew what he was getting into. He knew from the beginning of time that he was going to do this. He was going to do it because he loves you, because he wants to show his love to you, because he wants your heart to be mended. He wants you to be his child. So even as we read this, and even as it's a little difficult to get through, I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to remember why this whole story happened. This is not a lamb who fought, but he laid down. He laid down to give his life so that you could have life. Once again, this is a story from the Jesus Storybook Bible by ZonderKids, published by ZonderKids. And this is the story of the crucifixion, as found in Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23, and John 19, and it's in all four Gospels. And this is where this happens. The sun stops shining. "So you're king, are you?" the Roman soldiers jeered. "Well, then you'll need a crown and a robe." They gave Jesus a crown made of thorns and put a purple robe on him and pretended to bow down to him. "Your Majesty," they said. Then they whipped him and they spat on him. They didn't understand that this was the Prince of Life, the King of heaven and earth, who had come to rescue them. The soldiers made him a sign, "Our King," and nailed it to a wooden cross. They walked up a hill outside the city. Jesus carried the cross on his back. Jesus had never done anything wrong, but they were going to kill him the way a criminal was killed. And I'm going to shut the door because I think somebody else is here now. Sorry about that. They nailed Jesus to the cross. "Father, forgive them," Jesus gasped. "They don't understand what they're doing." "You say you come to rescue us," people shouted, "but you can't even rescue yourself." But they were wrong. Jesus could have rescued himself. A legion of angels would have flown to his side if he'd called. "If you were really the Son of God, you could just climb down off that cross," they said. And of course they were right. Jesus could have climbed down. Actually, he could have just said a word and made it all stop. Like when he healed the little girl and stilled the storm, fed 5,000 people. But Jesus stayed. You see, they didn't understand. It wasn't the nails that kept Jesus there. It was love. "Papa," Jesus cried, frantically searching the sky. "Papa, where are you? Don't leave me." And for the first time, and the last, when he spoke, nothing happened. Just a horrible, endless silence. God didn't answer. He turned away from his boy. Tears rolled down Jesus' face, the face of the one who would wipe away every tear from every eye. Even though it was midday, a dreadful darkness covered the face of the world. The sun could not shine. The earth trembled and quaked, and the great mountains shook. Rocks split in two until it seemed that the whole world would break. The creation itself would tear apart. The full force of the storm of God's fierce anger at sin was coming down on his own Son instead of his people. It was the only way God could destroy sin and not destroy his children whose hearts were filled with sin. And then Jesus shouted out in a loud voice, "It is finished!" And it was. He had done it. Jesus had rescued the whole world. "Father," Jesus cried, "I give you my life." And with a great sigh, he let himself die. Strange clouds and shadows filled the sky, purple, orange, black, like a bruise. We see the skies darkened. Jesus' friends gently carried Jesus. They laid Jesus in a new tomb carved out of rock. How could Jesus die? What had gone wrong? What did it mean? They didn't know anything anymore, except they did know their hearts were breaking. "That's the end of Jesus," the leader said. But just to be sure, they sent a strong soldier or two to guard the tomb. They hauled huge stones in front of the door to the tomb so no one could get in or out. Now here they're covering the tomb, but notice how there's a teaser. No one could get in or out. I want you to think about that. Because Jesus was frantically put into a borrowed tomb that they sealed and guarded. What were they worried about? Well, we're going to find out on Sunday that everything they were worried about was not nearly enough, because Jesus was about to do something that they had no idea. He wasn't going to lie or pretend or do a trick to come alive. He was going to be alive. He was going to defeat death. Death that seemed like it won that night when the sky closed in and darkness came down and the world shook, not knowing what had just happened to its creator. But just a little bit later, death itself was not going to hold him. Death itself was going to crack right open as he came back to life. And not just to a life where he could die again, but to a life everlasting. The same kind of life that he promises us, a life everlasting. So as we wait earnestly for our Resurrection Sunday, for our celebration, I want you to hang on to that hope. That though darkness may be around us, the clouds may close in, and it may seem like darkness has won. It's not. Sunday is on its way, and death itself cannot keep it back. There is nothing that can, because Jesus defeated it all. I can't wait for the rest of the story, guys.